In this video, we are going to go ahead and test our API using a console application through code. Before we do that, we want to make sure that we are running our API. We want to go ahead and test, make sure that everything is removed from our database. So if we go into our scalar, if we go to the activities, we want to run it and make sure that what we get back is an empty array. If not, we want to go through and delete anything that we have in the database before we start the console application. So at this point, let's go back to our fitness tracker. Let's stop this. We're going to go ahead and pin our Solution Explorer for the moment. We want to make sure that we are going to minimize our fitness API, and then we want to go ahead and stand on our solution file, right click, and this time we want to go ahead and add a new project, and this is going to be a console application. So if I come up here and pick console, I'm going to select the first item from the list, go ahead and call this test API, add it to the same top level folder. Make sure that we do not use top-level statements, and create the console application. We should now see that we have that console application. We want to expand our fitness tracker app, and within our models, we want to go ahead and copy our activity and paste it into our test API. So copying that down, the thing is we have to make sure that we're using the correct namespace, so we need to copy the namespace, come into our API and change the namespace to make sure that it corresponds to the new project that we are using. So that's going to take care of that. So now we have the exact same activity class file that was used by our API, and we can go ahead and test out all of our different commands to do an HTTP GET, put, post, and delete, and also our synchronize. We're going to go ahead and go to our solution where we can copy code from, and we have quite a chunk of code here. We want to start with our activity. We want to put in a toString, so we're going to copy that, and in our activity class, go to the end and add the toString method, save that. Then we want to switch over to our program and go back to our copy for code and bring in some code. We're going to actually update this code, but we have a chunk of it that we're not going to have to type. We're going to replace the existing line here with the code that we have. So in this case, we want to start at the top, and I'm going to pin this back so we have a little bit more room. In order to make our HTTP calls to our API, we have to use an HTTP client. You can see the definition here. We also need to give it the base address. So this is going to be, in our case, http://localhost and then the port. And if we look at our scalar reference, we should be able to get a lot of this information from our URL. And we can come back in and paste this in, replacing what is there. So that's going to be the http://localhost port 5015 for me. It's going to look a little bit different for you. Then we want to go ahead and clear any default request headers, and then go ahead and set our application/JSON in our header. That's going to be what is integral to getting this to work, since we're going to be passing in JSON. We're going to then create an instance of an activity because we need to insert something into the database. And to go ahead and make the call, we need to receive back from the call an HTTP response message, and we'll call this response. And from our client, we are going to execute the post as JSON async, passing in as the first parameter our URI, which essentially is going to be the remainder of our path. And if we look at it in our scalar and look at the post, notice that the remainder of the path is actually the API activities. And we can copy it from there and paste this in over here. So within double quotes, we're going to add that. I'm going to move that to the next line so we can see it. That's going to be our URI. It's going to take that and concatenate it to our URI up here. Then we are going to pass in our activity. But this is going to be an asynchronous, and we want to get the result back synchronously. So we're going to use the result, and that's going to ensure that we get that result back. Then we can go ahead and check to make sure that we have a successful status code back, and we can do that using the response.ensure success status code. And after that, we're just going to use a console.writeLine and write out the status code that we got back, and also just an extra line. After we do that, we want to go ahead and make a call to get all of our activities. And in order to do that, we're going to reuse our response and set it equal to the client, but this time we want to do a get async, passing in our path. This is going to be API/activities. That's all we need to provide is that path, and we're going to get a result back. The result is going to return to us essentially a status code. We want to make sure that we have a successful status code. So we're going to check to see if the response is a successful status code, and if it is, then we want to go ahead and get our content back that we can loop through and take a look at. So in this case, this is going to be a list of activities that we want to get back, and we'll call this activity list. We're going to set it equal to response.content, and we're going to read it from JSON async. We want to provide the type within angle brackets, and this is going to be a list of activity. Then we want to go ahead and get the result, and that's going to be the end of our statement. Once we have that, then we can go ahead and use the for each to loop through everything here, which is what we have here, and write out the lines. And I'm just going to put in a curly brace, which should go ahead and reformat that. And then after we write out each of those, then we just want to put a line separation in between. Then we want to go ahead and change some of the properties in our activity. We have an activity that we created as our post. Now we want to change a couple of those properties. Then we want to update the database with that. And in order to do that, we're going to get a response back from our call to the client using the put as async. And here we're going to just call that using our URI. This is going to be API, and we need to use string interpolation here because we need to also feed in the actual ID that we're going to be updating. So this is going to be activities / and this is going to be our activity.activity ID. So that's going to be our path, and then we need to follow that by passing through our activity, and then we're going to get that result back. Then we want to make sure that we have a successful response. So we're going to do the ensure success status code, and then we're going to write that out. Once we do that, then we're going to go ahead and get that particular record back. So this is going to be response equal client. We're going to use that get async again. In this case, our path is going to be a little bit different. We are going to essentially use string interpolation again. This is going to be API/activities / and then we have our activity.activity ID that we're passing in for the ending portion of our URL, and then we're going to get the result back. Then we want to go ahead and check to see if we have a success. And if we do, then we want to go ahead and get the activity This time we're going to be using the response.content.read from JSON async again. We're going to get an activity back, and then we want to get the result. So that's going to give us that activity result, and then we can go ahead and output that activity. Finally, we want to go ahead and delete the record, that number 1 that we just added. We're going to use the client.deleteAsync to do this, passing in our path, which is going to be API/activities. And again, we want to use string interpolation, and this is going to be our activity dot activity ID that we're passing in as part of the URL. And then we just want to go ahead and get the results. We're going to follow this up just to make sure that we have a successful, let's go to the next line, status code, and then we're going to write out that delete status code. So that's going to take care of that. Then we're going to go ahead and create a list because we've deleted everything. So we're going to create an activity. We're going to add it to the list. We're going to go ahead and create a second activity. We're going to add it to the list. And then we're going to go ahead and make changes to an activity that has the same ID as the first record. So it's going to update that. And then we're going to add it to the list. So it should go through and process 2 inserts and 1 update. We're going to go ahead and run this synchronize similar to what we did before with our post as JSON async. So in this case, we're going to set our response equal to client.post as async, passing in our URI, which is going to be our path API/activities/sync activities. Then we're going to be passing in our activities. I'm going to go to the next line. That's our list of each of the individual activities that we pushed on it. And then we're going to go ahead and get the result of that back. We want to then go ahead and do the response.ensure success code to make sure that we got a valid response back. And then we're going to write that out. So this is going to essentially go through each one of the APIs that we wrote, and it's going to use an HTTP call to actually do that. And then finally, we're going to use a console.writeLine so that we can hold it up so that it doesn't necessarily stop processing. Let's go ahead and save that. We're going to go ahead and start our HTTP fitness tracker API. Once that's running, we see that it is. Let's come into our Solution Explorer, and we're going to go ahead and right-click on this, and we can see that we can debug and start a new instance or start without debugging. We're going to go ahead and start without debugging and run the console application. We see the console application pop up, and we can see that it has created a record. It went through and returned the record from the list, and then we updated the record. We got the no content back. We went ahead and retrieved that record by ID. Then we deleted it, and then we processed our sync. And if we would actually go over to our process and run this after we did the sync, we should be able to go through and see that we have 2 records that were added. And the second record should be what was inserted, and the first record was inserted, and then it should have been updated. And this is the walkthrough of how we can run those HTTP commands to execute our API.